So this, yeah, I know. I don't like me either. So this is the third time we've done this. So, yeah, I know. I'm not that not entertaining. So I'm going to let Kevin and Jessica kind of do a little intro with themselves. And most of you, raise your hands if you've seen one of the other 2 years already. There's a lot of new people. All right, so I'll let Kevin and Jessica take it in.
My name is Dr. Kevin Grazier. By education, I am a planetary dynamicist, computational physicist, planetary physicist. They all converge in the same spot. My research involves doing large computer models of early solar system evolution. I have also been the science advisors on several TV series and feature films, most notable Battlestar Galactica, Eureka, and most recently, Foundation. I also am the co-author in the Hollyweird science series of books on which these panels are based.
And I'm Jessica Cail. I have a PhD in behavioral psychopharmacology, so basically drugs in the brain. I'm going to be on, little pitch, I'm going to be on a recreational drugs as therapeutic drugs panel right after this, so I'll be, or almost right after this. And also one tomorrow on the science of Dune, where I'll talk about the hallucinogenic properties of spice. So some cool stuff. I'm also a science advisor for movies and television, working a lot with Marvel and Luke Cage, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Iron Fist, and anything with super soldier-y stuff in it, because I used to work with the military, so those are the kind of stuff. And I'm also Kevin's co-author on the Hollyweird science books.
Okay, so some of you have seen this before, some of you haven't. I want to mention part of the reason why this is the third time, because the first time we did this, a large portion of the people who wanted to see it got locked out of the room. And so we did, last year we did another version of it, which had a lot of overlap for the previous year. And in fact, what was funny is I wanted to talk about how logical fallacies make their way into TV and film. And I led off with a question. I said, who's a Babylon 5 fan? Okay, a couple hands go up, and that's the same as last time. Then I said, finish this sentence. Truth is a three-edged sword. Your side, my side. That's the answer we usually get. See, I'm a big Babylon 5 fan, and maybe I'm just a little bit bigger of a nerd than I thought, because no one ever answers that. It's your side, my side, and the truth. And we kind of started from there and talked about that logical fallacy, how a human logical fallacy that's really common, it's kind of baked into our society, end up being put forth as ancient Vorlon wisdom in Babylon 5. And that happens a lot, because screenwriters are humans. They are immersed in our culture and our fallacies, and often those make it to TV and film, and that's one of the things we're including in the third Hollywood science book, and if there's a fourth, which there probably will be, the fourth is we have sidebars in these books that go into a little deeper dives into the science. Translated, we do some math. And we found that there's so much anti-science out there and in TV and film that we're starting to do anti-science boxes where we talk about the logical fallacies and the cognitive biases that are used to put forth anti-science beliefs. And that's the starting point for these panels.
And you could see where that logical fallacy of your side, my side, and the truth would come in, because in a political season like this, you've got, rules on news, on at least public news, that you're supposed to have an equal and balanced play on different controversial topics. But if everything is approached with the idea that there's, your facts, my facts, and then the truth, then where is reality among all of that? So you'll argue with somebody who might have a different political opinion or a different opinion on some scientific topic or a conspiracy theory, and you say, well, these are the facts on this, and they say, yeah, but those are your facts, those aren't my facts. And then you get the news who's like presenting things as equal and balanced, like, well, let's present the two sides of the theory of evolution. There's the side that is verifiably correct, but then they present the other side as if it was equal to it, and that gives credibility where it shouldn't be. So this your side, my side, and the truth is itself a fallacy. If the truth is well-settled science, then it shouldn't be approached in that way.
And carrying that one step farther, it's how anti-science, the evil forces of anti-science, I'm sure I can say that in this crowd, propagate the notion that there's even debate on some topics like climate change, that they'll say that they'll put out an opposing viewpoint, and the fallacy this is called the false compromise, by the way, and we went into it before, but covered briefly here because it's so common. They'll say, well, you know, the human. Let's start with the human nature is to say, if you see two people in conflict, it's to say, well, it's not this person's side, it's not this person's side. The answer is somewhere in between, which is what the Vorlon wisdom said. And that's not true. It overlooks the fact that sometimes one person is just wrong, or sometimes one person is just kind of an a-hole. So,
Or they're both wrong.
Or they're both wrong. There's that too. So the notion that there is in some topics in science that there is even an alternate viewpoint that is factually correct or verifiably correct, sometimes it's wrong. But it's kept. When we started saying, "What about the other side?" It gives them unearned credibility and makes the populace think that the answer is somewhere in between. When we have boatloads of data, information, and science that says, no, this is now settled science. So it's used to keep the notion that there is a debate alive when there is none. Any questions so far? We'll stop periodically and ask if there's any questions. So,
Go for it.
okay. So this year, that's the past. Oh, and the reason we brought that up is because, like I said, Jessica pointed out the last time I tried that trick, is that no one ever gets that answer. It's like, here I thought this would be a great way to lead in this talk, and it was an awful way to lead in this talk. So maybe we can start with something a little better this time. And one of the things that you'll hear a lot today that we want to talk about first, because we're spending some time in it in the current book. I'm actually writing 2 science boxes against this because it's so ripe with promise that we can milk for 2 science boxes. And that is the appeal to nature fallacy. If it's natural, it must be better. Yes, we're already getting laughter on that. Good. And of course, that's not necessarily true. But the one cinematic or television example I wanted to start with was an episode of Star Trek Enterprise. Okay, I see some people already reacting. And you're going to like this. It's in the first season, so it's before it got good. Oh, the last 2 seasons weren't bad. Come on. Episode was called Dear Doctor. Is anyone familiar with it? Yeah. Oh, some will admit to it. So how recently have you watched it through? Crickets. You what? Okay. So in Dear Doctor, the Enterprise comes across a planet where there are 2 species of humanoids that arise through parallel evolution. They're not related. They can't interbreed. It's like brown rats and black rats. That doesn't say that. That's my
Nerddom.
yes. So anyway, the Vulcanians. Is that the right? I have to write these down. Yeah, Vulcanians. Got that right. Are the sort of master species, if you will. They're the more intelligent, the more evolved. They are sort of, if you look at the Brave New World sort of environment, there would be the alphas and the betas in that. So the other are the mink. And the mink are like the deltas and the epsilons. They're not as intelligent. They are a working class. They do the work that the Vulcanians don't want to do. And they're fine with this. They have been told that you're happy, that you're cared for, and they're okay with the situation. Well, the Vulcanians have this genetic disease which we learn is going to kill them out in the not too distant future. They are a race that is dying, where the mink are fine. They're not related. They don't get this disease. The mink are not dying out from that. But Dr. Phlox comes up with a cure. We can cure the Vulcanians. But he also discovers that the mink are experiencing an evolutionary awakening. They are going to be as intelligent, maybe more intelligent than the Vulcanians in the not too distant future. Yeah, there's a couple things wrong with this. There's more than one fallacy here, but we'll go down that side quest here in a little bit. So he withholds the treatment. He has a cure and he withholds it. He says, I think the best path is to let nature take its course. Clearly not a fan of do no harm. So, whereas he says the mink will be either won't achieve their eventual potential, that was the word I was looking for, because the Vulcanians are standing in their way. Well, he wants to remove the Vulcanians, and that genetic disease is doing it, and he won't have it. In the end, what they decide is to give them a treatment, not a cure, and so the Vulcanians keep them alive for about 10 years, and maybe they can find a solution in that time period. And the whole kicker is, in the end, it is implied strongly that this incident was the basis for the Prime Directive. They're saying the Prime Directive is based on a logical fallacy that appeals to nature, that nature is always better. I'll stop there and see if you want to weigh in, because I got more and I could keep going, but...
It's been too long since I've seen it, but yeah.
Okay. Shall I get going?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So, here's any questions so far? Anybody want to challenge my synopsis of the episode? Okay. Okay, so first, let's just start with the morals of withholding a treatment. Okay, so again, clearly, letting nature take its course. Clearly, we generally don't believe that because we have vaccines and we have treatments and we conquer certain diseases all the time. So clearly, that's in contradiction to what we see as logic is withholding a treatment for a race that is going to die out. That is, okay, to use a colloquium, kind of douchey. So, and he sticks by his guns. I won't do it. Also, the notion that the mink are about to achieve an evolutionary awakening is also a fallacy. There is a notion called orthogenesis, which implies that evolution there can be an ending point. There is a goal, there is a destination that evolution is trending towards. That it's not necessarily survival of the fittest. It's this evolutionary path will end up here with the mink being superior. You can't say that. And a lot of science fiction is based on this. We've heard about things de-evolving, or we hear about evolving to a direction, and that just isn't true. So that misstates evolution as a basis for the fallacy that, well, nature is better, but is it? Because that's a fallacy in and of itself. And finally, there is an implication that while it sounds like Phlox is implying it's a win-lose situation, the fact is the mink are going to achieve their evolutionary awakening long after the Vulcanians have died out. And in that case, the question is, will the mink have the wherewithal to survive on their own, because they're presented as somewhat dim. They're excellent workers. They just may not be able to fend for themselves on this planet where they have been relegated to the crummy parts of the planet to live, whereas the Vulcanians get the fertile areas for the mink to come work. So the question is this a lose-lose? Is by withholding a treatment, or sorry, a cure, is it a lose-lose? Will both species perish? So what's presented as appeal to nature, it's best let nature take its course, could be that we're just like relegating an entire planet to death. And this is one, a sort of extreme example of the appeal to nature, but it's not that uncommon, and it's an extreme one because the fundamental premise under which the Federation operates, unless you're James T. Kirk, is that don't interfere, and supposedly it's based on this incident, and which is just rife with one, arguably two fallacies.
My side of appeal to nature, teaching psychopharmacology at a university is that you see a lot of, anything drug or pharmacological or pharmaceutical is bad, or anything that's difficult to pronounce is bad. And I really don't think your dietary intake should be limited to the things you can pronounce. So one of the things I do, and this is fresh in my mind because I just did it last week in my pharmacology class, is I put up a slide, and a slide is all of the chemical names for the things that are in a single bite of spinach. And it's like palmitic acid and blah, blah, blah. It's all the different enzymes, all the different aminos, but the full actual proper chemical names for them, and they all sound terrifying. And I'm like, would you eat this? And they look at the list and they're like, no, I'd never put that. Well, it's a bite of spinach. People who eat this live longer. And so, then what would you do? And sadly, what we usually do in this country is take the fact that people who eat spinach in general live longer. We take every one of those substances that's in a single bite of spinach. We make a megadose supplement of that one item instead of just eating flipping more spinach in general. But, it's hard to market spinach as much as you can market a, supplement of this, of this, of this, of this, of this in megadoses. So we see a lot of that, fear of anything you can't pronounce, fear of chemistry, the idea that nature is always better. I also often point out, like, for anybody here who thinks that, nature is always better, that nature is always better, number one, like anthrax is all natural. How healthy is that? Opiates are all natural. Those are, not good for you, but unless you really need them for pain medications. And there's a lot of things that are just peddled to people as all natural that are not great. One of my pet peeves is, because I come from LA, that I see so many of the, and I have a lot of friends who are this, so I'm not, maligning them too badly, but they're like, the hippie drippy yoga, I do yoga cleanse and hot yoga on Tuesdays, and I have a spirulina, whatever. Fine, like whatever makes you feel healthy. But those are the very same people who say, well, you need to let nature take its course, who are taking probiotic supplements. That isn't the biome you have in your gut. You didn't earn that biome by eating well. And honestly, many of them, I think, wouldn't need to go on so many 5-day lemon cayenne juice cleanses if they lived better 90% of the time. But no, they treat their body like crap. They party late at night, drink substances, eat substances, and then they go on a cleanse like it fixes it all. And like, number one, the nature you're putting in there is not going to fix it. And number two, if you really thought nature would take its course, you'd suck it up, take the hangover, and don't have the biome that you didn't earn by eating vegetables. You can't just take that in a pill. Okay, serenity now. Serenity. Yeah.
So, and Jessica went where I was wanting to go, and that was the notion of chemophobia, which a lot of people like to make a lot of money on, and it's rampant, and it's a variant of the appeal to nature fallacy, and that makes its way to TV and film too. There was one, actually I'm blanking on the movie, where Gwyneth Paltrow's character is talking to her sister, and her sister says, oh, try this new hair product, it's got jojoba in it. She says, what's jojoba? She says, oh, I don't know, but it's natural. And she says, why shouldn't it natural? Why should that matter? And that's the proper response. But that just, we never get that. We get that if it's natural, it must be better. And, cyanide is natural. Strychnine. You don't have to try too hard with castor beans to make rice. Things like that.
I was consulting. I was helping consult on a comedy short, and they needed to come up with like a vitamin water, a plausible vitamin water drink, energy supplement, something like that. And it's like, it needs some like ingredient that could be in it that sounds all sciencey and stuff like that. And what we came up with is, now with more zazz. It's like, what what is it now with 52% more zazz? It sounds very sciencey, and like, what's zazz? It's an all natural zazz, but they don't explain what it is. Oh, just as a humorous skeptic side, I have a friend who arranges, who is one of those booking agents for arranging those like focus groups for cosmetic and beauty products. Now, I'm clearly not one of those cosmetic-y type people who should be reviewing cosmetic products. But occasionally, she likes to throw a curveball into these focus groups to see what will happen and how the companies will respond. So she threw me into some hair care product focus group. She's like, yeah, we'll give you $100, it'll be fun. And I go in there, and all the other people are like, oh, wow, this has, and I swear to God, the new product had like, now with more Zazz in it. And I'm like, what is Zazz? What is Zazz made out of? And they're like, Zazz, it improves your hair texture. Yeah, how does it improve the hair texture? Well, it does this by improving the cuticule. How? Just tell me about it. And they couldn't do it, and it just bugged me. And they're like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely you are to buy this? I'm like, if nobody's going to explain what Zazz is, I'm not buying it. But everybody else was raising their hands, and I realized who they're usually selling to, and they're selling to people who are just like, it's got more Zazz, and they're not really thinking it through what that is.
Any questions at this point?
What is Zazz?
Go ahead. We don't know what Zazz is either, so.
You know that Enterprise episode also had a fast.
But wait, is there a mic we're going to have?
We're streaming, so if you speak there, then they can hear you at home.
Yeah.
Okay. The Enterprise episode also had a faster-than-light spaceship with artificial gravity, which, I'm sorry, is less plausible than the idea of an evolutionary level. We have something similar in the form of niches. We can see, this is more convenient, yes. We can see some animals evolving to take a similar role as another animal. There's really nothing that's even close to justifying how you could send people on a ship, to another star in anyone's lifetime, or for that matter, have gravity on a ship in the way that it's presented in Star Trek.
Are you familiar with the Alcubierre drive?
Nah.
It's a real-world solution to Einstein's general relativity that would permit Star Trek-style warp drive.
All right. Well, we'll see if someone builds one or not.
Well, building it is another thing, but the physicists would say, we have shown it can be done, now it's an engineering problem.
As from the science advising side of it, A, we're really low on the totem pole. B, the powers that be often call and say, come up with something plausible-ish, but the end of the day, a show has to be entertaining, and it has to give across what they want to have happen. And you can help them make it happen in a plausible-ish way, but you're not going to be a roadblock to that. So that's the best we can do. If they want warp drive, they're going to get warp drive. We can try to explain it the best we can, but they're still going to have that because they need that to further the plot. Otherwise, things aren't very entertaining. Otherwise, everybody'd be dialing into Netflix watching dissertations, which wouldn't be very fun or entertaining at all.
Even their committee didn't want to be in the dissertation.
Yeah, I didn't want to be in my own dissertation hearing.
I'll tell you, as far as the FTL goes, I was flying to Vancouver. Actually, I was going to the set of Battlestar Galactica one day, and I get a call from Bradley Thompson, who is a writer on the show. He's probably the closest person I was closest with on the show, as far as the writing staff. And I'm speaking to him on the airplanes. We're taxiing to the gate, and he says, "You knew this was going to happen, but we now need you to figure out how the FTL drive works." And I said, "Bradley, I have been up all night. I'm running on fumes." He said, "You have the 10 o'clock a.m. tomorrow, 10 tomorrow to come up with this." Great. So, no, actually, I'm leaving out the best part. We need you to figure out how the FTL drive works. This is up for the Pegasus, for on the Battlestar Pegasus. So the captain can run down to engineering, in a rapid con-like maneuver, the captain can run down to engineering, fix the problem, and lose his life in the process. And this is how Lee becomes the commander of Pegasus. So we had a working model. We knew how the FTL drive worked, and I can say it's probably, if it's closest to anything else in science fiction, it's the Highliners of Dune, but it was more complicated because it had to include what does spooling up mean. We have a special effect that we have to match, that this has to match. So we have all these preconceived things that have to match. We can't just say it's like Highliners Dune, because there's a little more to it that we have to sort of retcon, I guess is retroactive continuity. So, and the final answer did involve a spooling up. It involved having multiple generators and constructive interference and all this stuff, and we never had to say how it works. We said that it works. We knew it, so we could have Captain of Pegasus go down and fix the ship and lose his life. But as far as FTL goes, it was based on what I came up with was based on, again, borrowing from Dune, but also from general relativity and knowing that space has a fabric that can fold and bend and warp. And so, again, plausible-ish. But I wouldn't bet against humanity on one day overcoming that barrier. You'll never travel faster than light in a local frame, but velocity is defined locally. It's not defined universally. We have galaxies that are moving away from us faster than the speed of light, but that involves both their local motion and the fabric of space stretching. So we actually have natural faster than light travel right now.
Nature.
Nature's better, see? I guess it is. Wow. One word has proved our entire first third of our panel, right?
Sometimes it is. The problem is the assuming it always is.
Right. And especially when it comes to the chemicals, and I kind of want to linger a little bit longer on chemicals because there are several people who, make a living, and certainly a lot of fear-mongering happens because of a fear of chemicals when we are chemicals. I mean, there's the famous dihydrogen monoxide, or however you want to produce it, or pronounce it, dihydrogen oxide. I would just go hydrogen oxide because that's the correct way of saying that. But it's water, right? And the number of people who've been scared, there are a number of dihydrogen monoxide scares there have been. There were DJs in Florida who talked about the rampant use of dihydrogen monoxide, and they damn near lost their jobs.
And did you know it's the primary ingredient in acid rain? That it's been found in dead bodies? Water. Just water.
Everyone dead had consumed dihydrogen monoxide?
Yep.
Everyone. All of them. So, the notion that chemicals are scary is based upon, then they say, well, it's unnatural chemicals. Well, what's that? Because a lot of chemicals of your unnatural chemicals are simple extractions from natural objects. And here's a great example. One of my favorite examples is that under the topic of essential oils, they're wonderful. It's aromatherapy, right? Did you know that turpentine is the essential oil of pine? So, just saying. And turpentine actually has a lot of the same chemicals as your essential oils that you use for aromatherapy. A lot of the scents that we use are not that great for you. And then we get to the topic of the first rule of toxicology is the dose doth make the poison. And then it all depends how much of this do you get. Who has seen, it doesn't happen as often as once it does, but who's seen the periodic dissemination of the whole aspartame is horrible for you? Don't drink aspartame in sweet beverages. Seen that whole thing? I know you've seen it. No one's seen it?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay, a few have seen it. Okay. Maybe I should put these back on. That's just filled with logical fallacies, and it's all about chemophobia and the notion that say, oh, there's methanol in it, or there's
something like that.
you get the same thing if you eat a piece of fruit. A lot of the things are correct, but it's a matter of dosage, and they don't talk about the dosage and things that you can happily withstand on small doses that you may get from aspartame is you get worse things from foods and beverages you consume happily.
You get more aluminum out of your diet as a substance that you need as part of your diet than you would in a dose of vaccine. But somehow when it's injected into you as part of a vaccine, that same amount of aluminum is terrifying to people.
Did you know that there is a chemical that consists of a gas that was used as in chemical warfare agent in World War I, and a metal that explodes when it hits water? And by the way, we're 70% water. and there's a chemical that combines this chemical warfare agent and this explosive metal, and it's being marketed by big theaters as a popcorn topic. Say again? I just go with salt. It's just salt. It's just salt. I had a guy going on this online. I said, "Did you know that?" And no, but when you phrase like that, both are true. Sodium explodes when you expose it to water. There are some great YouTube videos on that. And chlorine gas, was used as an anti-personnel agent in World War I. It's a nasty gas, but combined you get sodium chloride. And I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty yummy on most of my foods. I probably get too much of it, but the point is the way you phrase things, and when you phrase it as it's chemicals, it can be scary. And that's just table salt.
A funny aside of that, one of the science consultants I had, one of the funnier science consultants I had, was working on Iron Fist, and they wanted me to try to explain how. Okay, if you've seen Iron Fist, it's set, Defender is a very grounded universe in New York City, in Hell's Kitchen, and Daredevil, and Jessica Jones and stuff. Yes, there's superpowered individuals, but it's this sort of gritty, grounded world. But now along comes a dude whose hands glow with power because he punched an immortal dragon in the heart. You're like, what? And they're like, ground that in science. I'm like, how? One of the jokes was I walked into the writer's room when the consult started, and they said, "So, immortal dragons, how do those work?" Like, but what they really had me in there for was to try to explain how his hands glow and to try to give them something plausible. Man, it was hard. And what I came up with is that because in the comics, at least, he is a Eastern trained meditation expert, that he can slow his heart rate so he seems dead. He doesn't need to breathe. He's like, there's all these things he can do. He can, activate his body in a way that gives him super strength and super reaction times and stuff. He's just basically a meditation superpower. And I'm like, well, if he can do that, and we have sodium and water in our bodies, just sweat. There is a biofeedback where people learn to train to stop their hands from sweating. They have excessive sweating, and you can train the body to train them with galvanic skin responding machinery that tells them when they're sweating and tries to help them learn to turn down their skin sweat. If he could turn down, if people could do that, why couldn't he turn it up? Why couldn't he maybe move the sodium from his body to his hands, ignite it with water from his body as sweat, and then just sort of have the glowing hands? They did not take my ideas. Why? That was such a cool idea. It was so funny. And they just chose to say, like, basically in the show, if you saw it, it was just like, dragons, what are you going to do? That's what they went with.
I would have gone with symbiotic bacteria.
It would have been a lot of cool stuff there, but, I had tried to go with meditation angle.
That was cool, though. That was cool. I'm just being a pain in the butt. Sorry. Because I can't. Any more questions other than that, talking about Star Trek and faster than light and artificial gravity, which we didn't even talk about yet because, see, I would say that's not a fallacy, that's a practical necessity, because do you really think you're able to tell your story when everyone's floating? It's like, everybody explains away the gravity. Star Trek, they have artificial gravity. The Expanse, they have their mag boots. Galactica, we actually have that in-house too, and it's an offshoot of the warp drive. And you can look in the book, The Science of Battlestar Galactica, co-authored by yours truly, and see a little bit more explanation of how we sort of saw the artificial gravity working, which is kind of cool, by the way. Have you ever noticed this minor point that on Galactica, they have a one-sided landing bay? On Pegasus, they have two-sided landing bays, so you can land like this or land like this. No one ever noticed that? There's a lot of things about Battlestar Galactica you didn't notice, I promise.
I think it's XKCD or somebody that has how the ships are always portrayed in movies, and they all meet nose to nose, and how it would really be in nature, and it would be like somebody's like this, somebody's like this, somebody's like this, somebody's like this, like which way is up in space? But you always see in movies just like two spaceships show up like this, like they're on a road. Like, why would they not be in? Who knows whose orientation is right?
Perpendicular to the galaxies, or and you
Which galaxy gets to determine that?
The galaxy that we're in right now. Do you
Okay.
think we're ever going to go outside this galaxy? No questions? Okay, well,
Oh, wait,
Jessica.
wait, wait.
Oh,
So, on the other side of the coin, then, especially from like the chemical or pharmacology standpoint, right? We all get inundated with the, ask your doctor about whatever. Are there things where you look at it and you're like, oh, if that's in there, that is a bad idea? Or like a side effect where you're like, oh, if I see that side effect, that's a bad idea.
Nothing that comes immediately to mind because it's so hard to get something to market. And if something does come to market with a lot of side effects, like a poor safety index, it's got to be something that cost-benefit analysis has, won out on. Like, if you have terrible, terrible side effects, but it's the only drug in town for a childhood brain cancer, like, fine, let it come to market. It's their only game in town. But if it's something for an antihistamine because you don't want to have runny noses, then that probably won't come to market. I haven't seen anything terrible. There are some terrible side effects for things that are worse, and so I don't worry about as much that. I worry more about, honestly, the side effects of some of the natural stuff that I see in the natureceutical thing. A lot of people don't realize the FDA does not regulate anything in the natural food aisle. Anything that's considered a supplement, which means anything that could, in plausibility, be eaten as part of your diet, is not regulated. And a group of British scientists went and pulled hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bottles of various supplements, ginseng, various supplements out of these British pharmacies. Sometimes 2 bottles next to each other on the shelf from the same brand, sometimes different bottles of different brands and stuff, and then analyzed all of them, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bottles. And they found that 2/3 of them did not contain any of what was on the bottle label. They were all chopped up grass, chopped up hay. Good luck if you have allergies there. They can be anything. And the bottles that actually had in them what they said they had in them, 2 next door bottles from the same brand could vary in dose of that substance by up to 10 times over. And so it is the Wild West out there. People are just chopping up little bits of hay, sticking them in a capsule, selling it to you for ridiculous amounts of money. You know what? They're right. It's 100% all natural. It's chopped up hay. And you just spent a lot of money for that chopped up hay.
hey, because 100
there's
million rabbits can't be wrong. Right?
Yeah, there's a million jokes that are about to come out of Kevin right now. Yeah. They're all fighting for dominance right now.
Yeah, there's a log jam. They're all trying to get out.
Which one won?
They all collided at the door. They're all trying to get out. No. So I kind of wanted to move on with chemophobia because we kind of talked between us beforehand and decided that we could spend the entire time on chemophobia, but we don't really want to. Okay, yeah, we kind of do, but there are other things we want to talk about as well. And I do want to point out one other thing about aspartame, though. The whole thing of, did you know that aspartame, we talked about how there periodically you get the emails that go out that how horrible it is for you. Did you know that all aspartame are 2 amino acids bonded with a peptide bond? And one of them is an essential amino acid that you need to survive. The problem is that essential amino acid, some people are sensitive to it. Yes, they need it, yet they can't consume it. And that's the problem with it. There is a problem with aspartame. There is a serious problem for some people, but as a generality, it's no problem. And another thing, as back to the dose does make the poison, back when saccharin was a common sweetener, and it was not bad. It's really not that bad for you. The people who came out against it said it's caused cancer in laboratory rats. And this is like the first time I ever took a math problem and figured out, I got the information from the news, and I calculated, and this turned out to be the exact number, that it would take, you would have to get the dose the rats were getting to get cancer, you would have to consume 800 12-ounce cans of soda, diet soda, a day. I mean, so sometimes when these substances are said are to be horrible, they're horrible if like you spend all day consuming it and nothing else.
Or in vitro, which is, you take a ridiculous concentration of it, you squirt them on some cells in a dish in a laboratory counter somewhere, and you see what happens to those cells. But that is not at all what will happen if you drink a normal amount of that substance, and then it goes through your liver and into your bloodstream in tiny little doses. So, the scare tactics are, I think, relying on this fallacy of nature nurture, no, not that one. Nature is good and chemical is bad, but also relying on the idea that, well, actually, let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, I want to leave with one thought on this. One final thought is that as far as nature goes, nature is an arms race. And plants are evolving as to not be eaten. And animals are evolved to basically withstand their chemical attacks. And so it's a constant arms race. Both sides are trying to kill
That's
the
all
other.
nicotine is. The people who smoke love nicotine. Nicotine is a terrible tasting substance that the plant puts out going, please don't eat me. And then what do? We smoke it. And some people like the pick-me-up and the stimulation that they get from it, a little cognitive boost. It is one of the few nootropics. People often ask me as a psychopharmacologist, like, are there any nootropics? Like Limitless, everybody saw Limitless, and they're like, I want the drug where you can take it and you'd be like, whoa, I can learn anything. And we don't have very many of them in the world that actually work as a nootropic. Nicotine is one of them. This is not a good enough reason to start smoking if you don't smoke. But it does provide a little bit of a boost, and in some of the same systems that are damaged in Alzheimer's disease. So one of the treatments is actually nicotine therapy for Alzheimer's. It won't cure it, but it will slow the progression because it kind of picks up where the disease is damaging. But yeah, there's nature nurture. It's like, wow, I want the Limitless drug. You have to start smoking. That's cost-benefit analysis.
For those who don't know, nootropic.
Nootropic is I don't want to say brain boosting, like a cognitive enhancing drug, like in the movie Limitless, where you could take it and you learn more easily, encode your memories more smoothly, and remember them more efficiently and can recall them better. So it does actually provide a little bit of cognitive boost.
So then vaping, 100 million millennials can't be wrong?
Oh, yeah. And what cost-benefit analysis again?
And that brings me to another, actually two different fallacies that I want to talk about. And one is called the appeal to the majority. If they're doing it, it must be good for me. Dragon Con, 130,000 nerds can't be wrong, right? Well, maybe not. I mean, but that
They're not wrong.
They're not wrong, but that's not an argument from Dragon Con. I would say that it's a fallacy, but it's used fairly often. And on TV and film, one of the places it's used, and it's very important, is in voting, because networks are somewhat loath to announce the winner of an election, even when they're known well in advance, because stuff happens. There are twists and turns in the world, and people will tend to want to be in the majority. They want to be in the winning side. So some people actually vote for the person. If it was announced when we got as far west as like Mississippi that Team A was the winner, there would be a disproportionate number of people who switched their vote from Mississippi and west. So there is the tendency to want to be on the majority. The majority must be right, and that is a powerful argument that networks have to counter when they're talking about elections. Anything you want to say? Because I'm going to go on to the first. The flip side of that, this will be more fun, appeal to the minority. And that has often more anti-science implications. Appeal to minority is, well, if this minority, this obscurity, appeal to minority and appeal to obscurity are kind of are related fallacies. The notion that, well, I have this bizarre idea, this I have a theory. Yes, I'm intentionally using theory wrong because we know that people who say things like this use the word theory wrong. I have a theory that, anyway, oftentimes when they're shown to be kind of not mainstream science and maybe outright wrong, well, they laughed at Galileo. Yeah, they did, but that was because he had weird hair. No, but the notion that somebody in the minority, one person who was ultimately right, well, they laugh at him, why can't you take me? Well, that's always a minority opinion. That's a minority person. That's some exceptional individual. And I'm going to talk about Galileo separately here in a little bit. But the notion that there's this one person who was laughed at, who was cajoled, who was and ended up being right. Well, that's me. The odds of you being Galileo aren't high.
This spins into one thing I see as a spin-off of these arguments, especially online, is that the idea that some people don't seem to realize that in science there is a difference between nobody has looked into this. Are you open-minded enough to accept that it might be right or it might be wrong? So let's say somebody comes out and says, blah, blah, blah causes cancer, and nobody's looked into it. In which case,
Zaz.
a scientist, yes, Zaz causes cancer. Oh my gosh, I've been drinking Zaz like crazy. What am I going to do? So I want the evidence of that, but there's no evidence out there on that. A good scientist should be open-minded enough, and hopefully anybody following evidence-based thinking should be open-minded enough to say, well, I don't know if that's the case. It doesn't sound like it would, but let's wait until the data comes in to withhold our opinion on that. There's a difference between the work has not been done yet and the work has been done and it has been found to not relate to that thing. And the distinction between those two things is not really there. So what will happen is somebody who's following some sort of pseudoscience or somebody who's following some sort of scare tactic will say, blah, blah, blah causes cancer. And I'll say, no, the research shows they looked into this. It does not, conclusively does not. But yet they will come back to that with, why are you shutting down the people who say it does? And I'm like, because the evidence, I'm not shutting them down, the evidence is shutting them down. If nobody's looked into it yet, it is plausible that it might be the case. But if people have looked into it, there's a difference between it has been proven not to be the case, not that nobody's looked into it. And they often confuse those two. I will hear people say that there's, why has nobody looked into this? Why has nobody looked into vaccines causing autism? It is probably the most looked into thing ever into existence. It has been looked into. They found it does not relate. They're like, oh, they're shutting down all these people. Poor Andrew Wakefield. They're shutting down these people who say that there is a relationship between autism and vaccines. They're not shutting them down because they don't want you to know. Sorry about that. They're not shutting you down because they don't want you to know. They're shutting them down because that is factually incorrect, but they don't seem to see that distinction.
So on the topic of vaccines and autism, I want to say one thing. There was a Danish study of 650,000 people.
Whenever you have nationalized medicine, you have a great database of information.
650,000 people that over a long baseline study, so over several years, that found no instances of vaccines causing autism. Now, a scientist who understands that uncertainty trends as 1 over the square root of n, where n is the number of subjects, says, case closed. We're done on this topic. But not everybody is math literate, and that's where we have to do a better job maybe of explaining why this is a done deal.
I try to explain this visually as someone who teaches data science and research. What I do is I say, how many in this classroom have ever heard that, the mercury additive preservative, microscopic amounts of a safe mercury, the kind you get, whatever. Anyway, how many people have heard that mercury in vaccines causes autism? Say, okay. And lots of people usually raise their hand, and I say, okay, when the idea came out that that might be the case, everybody pulled that preservative from their formulations just in case it was true. And I throw a graph up there of number of autism cases broken down by year, but I cut the year off the bottom axis so they can't tell what year is down there. And I say, look at this trend in autism diagnoses, and from your perspective it's going up like this. And I say, look at the trend. I will pay you $10 to anybody who can point to the place where the mercury additive was pulled from this vaccine, right? Because if that was the money of what was causing autism, the graph should just drop right there and no new cases, right? But the graph goes like this, and nobody could point on that trend where that additive was removed. And so I'm like, it's increasing number of diagnoses. Yes, they're happening, but to look at that and say it must be because of this substance in there. The substance has been pulled a while ago, and the trend is going up. People are catching it more. There's more awareness of it. We're less stigma associated to it. That accounts for the increase, not chemicals in the water or any of those other things necessarily.
Back to the topic of the sodium chloride example I used, that chemicals have different behaviors when they're bound in a compound, like sodium and chlorine. Mercury is not in vaccines. A mercury compound is in vaccines, so therefore it's going to behave differently. And who here has a tattoo? Show of hands. Did you know that thimerosal, the vaccine, that the preservative in vaccines that causes autism, it preserves mercury ink, or I'm sorry, vaccine ink? Did you know it's in makeup remover? Did you know it's in facial cleansers?
Did not know that. Somehow injectable feels like a more extreme intervention. I mean, you can see this in terms of placebo effect, other fallacies, but fallacies that we go with. The placebo effect, if somebody believes that they are being given a real treatment, 10 to 15% of them will experience it, not only the treatment of that as if there was something real in it, but also the side effects of that thing that had literally nothing in it. Yeah, all right, actually, skip that.
We have a question.
Mm-hmm.
To go along with your thing about the autism going up, brain cancer and cell phones. When they were like, cell phones cause
yes.
brain cancer. No, we can now detect brain cancer. You know, back when my grandfather got brain cancer years ago, we didn't have CT scans, we didn't have MRIs. Until you get it, you know, so now we have more diagnosis.
Yeah.
The cause-effect thing that's not a, you know, they like to make a cause and effect for things that don't have a cause and effect.
Yeah, because life is scary. We are connection-making machines. That's what we do. And B, life is scary. And if you feel like you have control over things by making a cause-effect association, and that explains a lot of the personality characteristics of people who fall prey to conspiracy theories. It is more comforting to think that there's a cabal of alien lizard Democrats drinking the chroma whatever of young children to stay young than it is to think nobody in Washington knows what they're doing, and that there's, you know, nobody's running the asylum. It's just easier.
There is also a cognitive bias called need for cognitive closure, and that is, it's nice to think that you know the answer to this when no one knows the answer to this, or whether it's lizard, aliens.
Yeah.
That's in that one respect. That's how scientists differ from a lot of people. Those who choose to become scientists wake up, read the news, and say, "What? The universe is different than I thought it was yesterday? Cool!"
Yeah, and I get comments sometimes online about from people who aren't scientists who say, "Oh, you scientists are all so close-minded. Like you make up your mind, you go out, you test it, you prove your results." And I'm like, "Have you ever heard of the null hypothesis? We stack the deck against ourselves, and only when we fail to disprove it do we assume that we might be onto something." That being said, I fall prey to these assumptions too. I just finished talking about cell phones and possibility of causing brain cancer in my class this week. And I said, okay, I know, meta-analyses, huge analyses, it probably doesn't. You'd have to talk a ridiculous amount with one of the old brick cell phones from the 80s with high tower connectivity and all that stuff. But that being said, knowing that my language area is over here and this area is just, you know, regular old temporal lobe, I kind of have still switched from talking on my phone on the left ear talker, but I've tried to switch over to the right ear talker because if it does cause brain cancer, I'd rather have it in the right temporal lobe than the left temporal lobe so I don't lose my language, which sounds like I don't want it at all, but,
But if you had to.
But if I had to.
I'm going to add one thing. I was stuck in traffic on the 405 in Los Angeles on the way to Santa Monica College to teach a class about the search for life in the universe. Like the solar system life out there. So we are clearly open to the idea of extraterrestrial life. I'm sitting here stuck on the 405. I see somebody tweets at me who's seen an episode of The Universe I was on where I talked about some of the challenges for alien life to get to Earth. And he basically said, "You're so close-minded." So what I did was I went into my class. I finally got there. And just took a picture of them all pointing and laughing and then tweeted it back at them. Anyway, we have another question.
Can you speak a little bit to the appeal to the minority and the stuff that they don't want you to know, and how that might, sometimes that is actually true, something like MK
Yeah.
Ultra, and how that might interplay with how people are dealing with that now?
Can I?
We love underdogs, just in general, psychologically, we love underdogs, and we're always willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. But I would hope if we move people to a more evidence-based way of looking at things, just because somebody's in the minority doesn't mean they're right. There's a difference between, I don't care if you are in a minority, we looked into what you were asking, found it was not the case, you're wrong, or, you know what, you're in the minority, nobody thinks there's a problem here, but nobody's looked into it, the minority might be right, and I think we need to make that distinction really strongly.
One of the things when I was an investigation scientist for the main camera on the Cassini spacecraft, which is a fairly high profile, $3.3 billion mission, fairly high profile position, and I literally got roughly once a month somebody's manifesto. It was Newton's a bonehead, Einstein couldn't be more wrong. Oh, and here's a new source of energy.
Yeah.
So those are
Perpetual motion, I did it.
Yeah, and then that, and that. And
I got a couple of those, I don't know why, I'm a brain scientist.
I got about one a month, and and they're all, and they all go with the notion that, well, they laughed at Galileo too, or they laughed at Einstein. Well, Einstein's the one who had the hair; they laughed at him for that. But one of the things I did to sort of counter this is how many people have heard from documentaries the notion Jupiter defends Earth from comets raining in from the outer solar system? Who believes that? Guess who wrote the paper that showed it to be bunk? Okay. So what I did was I took the original study that supposedly on which this fallacy, and I'm confident calling a fallacy now, is based. And it was done with, in 1994 and 1995, somebody posted or wrote these two papers. He used a numerical method that had known failure modes now and has known weaknesses in other areas. And I just took modern numerical methods that have a better accuracy, recreated the results, and show that when an object like a comet or asteroid, planetesimal, sort of a generic term, enters into Jupiter's sphere of influence, it's just as likely to send that at us as away from us. And in fact, the closest approach of a comet in history of Earth's history, recorded history, was in 1770, and it was believed to be redirected from Jupiter to the inner solar system. How many people saw last season of For All Mankind? Okay, so the Goldilocks asteroid, we actually figured out the mechanism by which Jupiter redirects things. That was based on my research. I know because I'm friends with the aforementioned Bradley Thompson from Battlestar. He's on that show. That they borrowed the mechanism. But anyway, the point being is, so after I showed that Jupiter is just likely to send it at us, Jupiter doesn't defend us, I published that as a single author publication, because I wanted to make a point. Because this is contrary to the current things that we're hearing on documentaries. It's contrary to the ways of thinking in astrobiology. And I published it as a single author publication. So you can never, ever come at me and say, well, this information is so groundbreaking that the science community just won't accept it. They're trying to keep it out. They're intentionally suppressing this information because I showed that doesn't happen. So that was one of the main, it was for a science communication standpoint, is that you can't tell me this happens anymore because I did the exact thing you're saying doesn't happen. And that was with intent. Okay. Go ahead.
My group watching For All Mankind was having a debate whether it's a prequel to The Expanse.
Actually, funny you should say that. For Hollyweird Science 3, we interviewed Michael Kuda, who was a graphics designer, well known for Star Trek, and he's on For All Mankind. And one day he was on the set, the mission control set of For All Mankind, and he saw Ron Moore sitting there. And he walked over and asked Ron, he said, Ron, where is this all going? He said, all this we're doing, the show we're doing, where's it going? He said, this is how you get Star Trek. So, you're close. But yeah, I made a connection until I heard Michael tell that story. And I said, we're interviewing for Hollywood Science. We have a minute left.
More like Expanse than Star Trek, though.
Yeah, well, it's also Expanse is shorter term future too. Well, Expanse is here, Star Trek is here.
I think to close the big picture in a skeptic way of that question, I think that appeal to minority is a super important thing to happen right now. You've got scammy companies or, conspiracy theorists who will march a group of people in lab coats out onto the steps of Congress, and they have nothing to do, no scientific credentials, and they say something is true, and you must believe it, and look how beat upon they are by the real scientists. They're beat upon because they don't have any facts behind them. But nobody's going to acknowledge that, and it looks like we're just beating up on the underdog. So I think the key thing to do for everybody who is encountering that kind of thing is to say, teach some data literacy to people and say, look, there's a difference between we looked into it, it's not true, and we haven't looked into it. If we haven't looked into it, the underdogs might be right. If we have looked into it, it's not true. We gave them the chance. They could not prove it. There's no abuse of a minority there.
And I believe we are done. Thank you ever so much for coming. Hopefully we'll be this number 4 next year. We appreciate seeing you. Thank you.